So the palace just confirmed that Princess Anne is taking over all of Camilla's official state duties starting immediately. And honestly, the way this went down is way more revealing than the announcement itself. This wasn't a scheduling conflict or a health-related step back. This was a direct consequence of something that happened behind closed doors weeks ago, and the fact that Charles signed off on it personally tells you everything about how serious the breach of trust actually was. Before we get into the details, do us a quick favor and hit subscribe to Crown Front so you don't miss the next update. Alright, let's break down exactly what happened because the timeline here is genuinely wild. Charles read the final announcement alone, then placed the document flat against his desk without saying a word. And that silence matters because the king understood this wasn't a simple diary change. Official state duties are the core responsibilities performed for the crown. We're talking ceremonial appearances, patronage visits, diplomatic receptions, and engagements directly beside the sovereign. By approving this transfer, Charles wasn't asking his sister to cover a few empty slots in the calendar. He was handing her an entire role, one that had become completely identified with his wife. Camilla received a confirmation from a senior courtier moments before the palace statement was released. She didn't argue, she didn't raise her voice. The queen consort simply asked whether Charles had personally approved every single word, and when the answer came back yes, her expression reportedly hardened. She wasn't just losing engagement, she was learning that the man beside whom she had fought for decades to gain acceptance had personally authorized her removal from the very duties that proved she belonged. Anne was summoned without ceremony and handed a sealed briefing folder. The princess opened it and found a revised calendar carrying her name across receptions, memorials, patronage visits, and diplomatic meetings. The palace framed this as an emergency restructuring meant to reorganize responsibilities immediately and prevent any gap in royal service. But the preparation revealed something much colder. This decision had been building well before Camilla was formally informed. One line in particular carried the threat. The transfer would remain in force until the sovereign determined otherwise. In plain terms, Charles alone would decide whether his wife ever reclaimed those duties. Anne paused over that sentence, then turned to the first engagement listed under her authority. It was a major state reception Camilla had planned for months, including a welcome speech she had written herself. Anne closed the folder, but she felt no victory. She felt the pressure of stepping into another woman's place while her brother's marriage strained under his own signature. Elsewhere inside the palace, Camilla understood that the reception meant to confirm her standing, would instead introduce Anne as the monarchy's center of duty. But before Anne could step into that role, the palace had to confront the painful truth that this was not simply a transfer of duties. It was a collision between loyalty, marriage, and royal survival. To the public, Princess Anne and Camilla occupied completely different corners of royal life. One was known for relentless duty, the other for standing beside the king through decades of controversy. Yet behind the formal smiles existed a far more delicate balance. Now that balance had broken, and the duties being transferred were not merely appointments on a calendar. They represented trust, status, and proximity to the crown itself. Anne studied the revised schedule at her private desk and felt no triumph. The princess had built her reputation through discipline, punctuality, and service without complaint, becoming the person the palace trusted whenever stability began to shake. Yet, this assignment carried a different weight entirely. She was not filling an empty place. She was stepping into duties that had become part of Camilla's public identity, and every successful appearance could look like proof that the queen consort had been replaced. Camilla opened the reception folder and slowly removed the handwritten speech she had prepared weeks earlier. She had written each word of that welcome with Charles in mind, believing the event would confirm her place beside him after years of criticism and resistance. A state role meant representing the crown at official ceremonies, diplomatic meetings, and public engagements on behalf of the monarchy. Losing that role meant losing more than a schedule. It meant watching the clearest symbol of her acceptance passed into another woman's hands. Anne turned another page and noticed names she had not expected. A senior aide entered and informed her that several household staff members had already been reassigned to support the expanded workload. Household staff are the private secretaries, planners, and advisors who manage a royal figure's official responsibilities. Their transfer proved the restructuring reached far beyond one reception. The palace was not preparing a temporary substitute. It was building a new center of authority around, and Camilla discovered the deeper loss moments later. Access to selected diplomatic briefing papers had been suspended, removing her from confidential material prepared for meetings with foreign representatives. She stared at the empty space where the files normally rested and understood the message instantly. Charles had not only taken away her public appearances, he had placed distance between her and the private machinery of royal power, and felt the pressure tighten as a message arrived from her brother requesting a private meeting. Charles had also summoned his wife separately, hoping to control the damage before resentment hardened into open conflict. But Camilla refused. She would not enter the room, she said, until the king explained exactly what incident had persuaded him to act so suddenly. Her refusal forced the palace to look backward to the single ceremony where a private disagreement became the point of no return. The crisis had not begun with the announcement. It began 3 weeks earlier beneath the polished formality of a diplomatic ceremony, where one altered seating card, one private objection, and one decision made without the king's approval turned quiet tension into open distrust. Everyone present continued smiling. But behind closed doors, Charles understood that a boundary had been crossed, and Anne witnessed the exact moment everything changed. Anne noticed the revised card only minutes before the Commonwealth Service of Renewal was due to begin. The princess had been placed behind 2 less senior representatives and removed from the position beside her brother during the central presentation. The order of precedence is the official ranking that decides where each royal figure stands during formal events, and changing it is never a harmless detail. It affects status, authority, and the message sent to every diplomat watching. Anne folded the card once and approached Camilla privately. She asked whether the change had been deliberate, keeping her voice low, even as the insult settled heavily between them. The queen consort did not deny it. She replied that the monarchy must reflect the king's household first, a phrase that made the meaning painfully clear. Anne was being pushed aside not because of ceremony, but because her closeness to Charles had become a threat. Camilla held her ground, yet the decision carried more risk than she admitted. The approved arrangement had placed Anne beside the king because she was leading the presentation of a new Commonwealth initiative. Moving her weakened the structure of the entire event and suggested that personal rivalry mattered more than the sovereign's plan. Still, Anne refused to react publicly. She returned to her place, completed every duty, and protected the dignity of the ceremony while swallowing the humiliation. Charles learned the truth only after the final guest had departed. A senior courtier placed the original plan beside the altered version and explained that his authority had been used to approve the change without his consent. The king stared at both documents and understood the deeper betrayal. His name had not been borrowed to solve a practical problem. It had been used to settle a private struggle over rank. The courtier then produced a documented email sent to Camilla's office hours before the ceremony. It clearly warned that the order must not be altered. She had received the instruction, understood it, and ignored it anyway. When Charles later asked Anne why she had remained silent, she answered that she would never embarrass the crown in public, but she would not allow the same thing to happen twice. That answer stayed with Charles until the night he finally brought Anne and Camilla into the same room and demanded the truth face to face. There were no photographers, no secretaries taking notes, and no ceremonial smiles to soften the moment. Charles entered first, Anne followed, and Camilla arrived last. When the door closed, the argument was no longer about a seating card or a reception schedule. It became a reckoning over authority, humiliation, and whether private loyalty had been used to manipulate the public machinery of the crown. Charles ordered every aide to remain outside and placed the documents between them. The king had chosen a private sitting room because a crisis was both personal and constitutional. Constitutional authority means the power attached to the sovereign's official role, not simply his wishes as a husband or brother. On the table rested the revised ceremony plan, the ignored warning, and the email that had used his name to approve a change he never accepted. Camilla spoke first. The queen consort insisted she had acted to protect the dignity of the sovereign's household, arguing that the people closest to Charles should stand at the center of royal events. She accused Anne of treating every adjustment as a personal wound and said the palace could not keep bending around one woman's pride. Her voice remained controlled, but the anger underneath it was impossible to hide. Anne answered without raising hers. The princess said the insult had never been about where she stood. It was about the king's authority being borrowed without permission. Charles had approved one arrangement, yet another had been imposed in his name. She looked directly at Camilla and made the accusation plain. Private insecurity had been placed above public duty, and everyone in the room knew it. Charles asked the question neither woman could avoid had Camilla known the revised order had already been rejected. Silence followed. Then she admitted she had seen the warning but believed her husband would support the decision once the ceremony was over. The confession struck harder than denial. She had not misunderstood the instruction. She had chosen to ignore it. Charles removed his glasses and set them beside the papers. The king then revealed that an emergency transfer of duties had already been drafted. Such an order is a formal instruction moving official responsibilities from one royal figure to another without delay. Camilla's expression changed instantly. This meeting was not a warning, and it was not an attempt at reconciliation. The decision had already moved beyond words. Camilla rose from her chair and faced her husband one final time during that confrontation. She told Charles that signing the order would do more than weaken her position. It would reveal who truly controlled the palace and who had already decided that Anne was the safer choice. Her final words raised a more dangerous question. Was Charles acting alone, or had a hidden circle already decided that Anne was the monarchy's safest future? Royal power rarely moves through a single dramatic command. It moves through calendars, private secretaries, legal language, security briefings, and the quiet agreement of people who understand what cannot be allowed to fail. Charles may have signed the order, but the machinery behind it had been turning for days, and Anne's name had emerged again and again as the only answer everyone trusted. Charles listened as his private office measured the damage. The king's advisors worked through patronages, foreign visits, investitures, military ceremonies, and appearances already promised in the royal calendar. An investiture is a formal ceremony where the sovereign or another senior royal presents honors to members of the public. Canceling such duties would create embarrassment at home and uncertainty abroad. Replacing Camilla slowly was not an option. The palace needed someone who could step forward without hesitation. Anne offered that certainty. The princess already carried a demanding workload, understood constitutional boundaries, and had avoided the personal controversies that could turn every appearance into another argument. Her discipline made her the strongest choice. But that strength created its own danger. The more dependable she appeared, the more Camilla's removal would look deliberate, permanent, and deeply personal. William received the briefing in private and chose every word carefully. The prince told his father that Anne could steady the institution, protect the schedule, and reassure foreign guests. Then he delivered the warning Charles had been avoiding. The decision might save the monarchy's public face, but it could permanently damage his marriage. The future king understood that royal stability often demanded sacrifice. Yet he also knew some wounds did not close when the announcement ended. Charles admitted what the advisors had not expected him to say. He felt he had failed both women. He had failed Camilla as a husband by allowing fear and insecurity to grow without challenge. He had failed Anne as a brother by asking her to endure quiet humiliations in the name of family peace. The king now faced the cruel result of that silence. Protecting one relationship had weakened them all. The advisors then presented documented concerns from several foreign delegations. Their written accounts described last-minute changes, altered guest arrangements, and instructions from Camilla's office that conflicted with approved plans. The ceremony dispute had not been isolated. It had merely exposed a pattern no one could ignore any longer. Anne agreed to serve, but only after making one demand. No statement could suggest she had requested, pursued, or campaigned for the role. She would accept duty, not victory. Before dawn, the revised roster was circulated, and one recipient immediately sent it to Camilla's household. By sunrise, the decision had escaped the room where it was made, and Camilla began dismantling the life that had been built around her official position. The most brutal sign of lost power was not a public statement or a hostile headline. It was an empty calendar. Engagements that had carried Camilla's name for months vanished, one by one, replaced by Anne's. Speeches were reassigned, briefings removed, and familiar staff redirected. For the first time since becoming central to royal life, Camilla was forced to watch the monarchy continue without needing her. Camilla sat with her private secretary as briefing books, transport plans, speech drafts, and guest lists were carried away from her office. The queen consort watched months of preparation disappear in silence. Briefing books are official files containing schedules, background notes, names, and guidance for royal engagements. Without them, she no longer had the information needed to represent the crown. That loss made the transfer real in a way no announcement could. Camilla ran her finger across the crossed-out appointments. A hospital visit, a diplomatic luncheon, a military commemoration, and the state reception had all been reassigned without delay. Each event had mattered because it connected her to the public role she had spent years building. She had endured suspicion, criticism, and resistance to reach the center of royal life. Now one morning had stripped away the proof that the struggle had meant something. Camilla asked whether any official duty remained under her control. Her private secretary hesitated before explaining that only private charitable contact could continue. Such contact meant she could support causes personally but not appear on behalf of the monarchy. The distinction cut deeply. She could still care, still write, still offer help, but she could no longer speak with the authority of the crown behind her. The fracture widened inside her own household. One longtime aide refused to transfer to Anne's team and resigned immediately, saying loyalty could not be reassigned like a diary entry. Another accepted the new position without protest. Camilla heard both decisions and understood what they revealed. Even the people around her were choosing between personal attachment and institutional survival. Charles sent a handwritten note asking her to meet him before Anne's first major appearance. The king did not send an aide or a formal summon. He wrote the request himself, hoping something personal might still reach her. Camilla read it once, then left it unanswered beside the removed state files. Her silence was not calm. It was the only control she felt she had left. Anne learned that the note remained untouched and felt the burden shift again. The princess understood that performing the duties without facing the damage would turn service into silent punishment. So before appearing in Camilla's place, Anne crossed the palace alone and asked for the conversation everyone else had been too afraid to arrange. No aides announced Anne's arrival. No official record preserved what followed. She entered carrying neither the duty folder nor the authority that had suddenly been placed in her hands. Camilla was waiting beside a closed diary, prepared for accusation. Instead, Anne offered something more difficult, the truth. Without ceremony, without witnesses, and without the protection of royal titles, Anne had requested the meeting before assuming the state reception. The princess believed the transfer could not begin while both women remained trapped in silence. Camille agreed only after confirming that Charles would not attend. Without the king present, there would be no institutional buffer. That's the formal protection created when royal authority advisors or official procedure stands between two people. This time, neither woman could hide behind duty. Anne spoke first. She told Camilla she had never wanted to reassign duties and did not see the decision as a personal victory. Every engagement she accepted would carry the weight of another woman's loss, yet she could not refuse when the crown's stability was at stake. Empty chairs, cancelled visits, and uncertain foreign guests would damage more than one household. They would make the monarchy appear weak at the exact moment it needed control. Camilla listened, then admitted what she had refused to say in front of Charles. The queen consort confessed that the altered ceremony order had come from insecurity. Anne's respect inside the palace seemed effortless, while her own place beside the king had been built through years of resistance. Every time the princess stood close to her brother, Camilla feared the comparison. One woman looked naturally trusted. The other still felt she had to prove she belonged and did not soften the truth. But she did reveal something unexpected. She had asked Charles to review the transfer after 3 months. The princess explained that a formal review meant the king would reconsider whether the arrangement should continue once the immediate crisis had passed. She had not requested permanent control, and she had no desire to turn temporary duty into lasting exclusion. Camilla opened the reception folder and removed the unfinished speech. She handed it to Anne and quietly asked that the opening tribute remain unchanged because it honored Charles, not either of them. The gesture did not restore trust, but it broke the silence that had hardened around them. Anne accepted the pages, and for the first time, Camilla did not see an enemy taking her place. When Anne left, Camilla picked up the king's handwritten note. She read it again, then walked toward the private room where Charles had been waiting. Their conversation did not restore Camilla's authority, but it changed the meaning of Anne's first appearance, and the world was about to witness that difference. By the time Anne arrived at the state reception, the announcement had already become a national spectacle. Every gesture was examined for triumph, resentment, or rebellion. Yet the defining image was not of Anne entering beneath royal banners. It was a photograph taken seconds before the doors opened. The princess holding Camilla's handwritten speech, her thumb resting over a line near the woman had chosen to erase. Broadcasters interrupted regular programming as the reception began. They explained that Anne had now assumed the complete state schedule transferred from Camilla, not merely one appearance. A state reception is a formal gathering where senior royals welcome diplomats, officials, and honored guests on behalf of the crown. The event mattered, because any sign of confusion would suggest that private conflict had weakened the monarchy's ability to perform its public duties and pause before entering. The princess knew that success carried its own cruelty. If she appeared fully confident, Camilla's removal would seem justified. If she hesitated, Charles's decision would look reckless. Palace staff spoke repeatedly of continuity, insisting that royal obligations would proceed without disruption. Yet Anne understood that every calm word she delivered would be measured against the woman whose speech remained in her hands. Camilla watched the broadcast beside Charles. The queen consort heard Anne begin with the tribute she had written for the king, and grief rose beside reluctant pride. Her words were still serving the crown, even though she no longer had the right to speak them. Charles remained silent, but he watched his wife closely. He could see that the moment hurt, and he could also see that Anne had refused to erase her. The photograph spread before the reception had even ended. A national newspaper placed it across the front page beneath the headline. The duty passes, but the words remain. The image changed the public mood. Anne no longer appeared to be celebrating a victory. She appeared to be carrying responsibility while preserving the dignity of the woman who had lost it. Outside Buckingham Palace, a crowd gathered beneath the balcony. One woman lifted a handwritten sign reading, "Service without revenge." Others repeated the phrases. Cameras turned towards them. The public had found its symbol, not the fall of Camilla, but Anne's refusal to turn that fall into humiliation. Charles received a final message after the reception. Camilla was ready to meet him. The king understood that the next conversation would decide whether her removal became a punishment or the beginning of a different role. The public had delivered its judgment on Anne, but only Charles and Camilla could decide what remained of their marriage and what her removal would finally mean. The final meaning of the crisis was decided away from cameras. Charles and Camilla sat opposite each other with no announcement prepared and no advisors waiting to shape their words. The duties would not be returned and would continue carrying them, but the conversation that followed transformed the decision from an act of public rejection into a painful boundary. One that saved the monarchy while forcing every person involved to face the cost. Charles spoke without hiding behind formal language. The king confirmed that Anne would retain every transferred state duty for the foreseeable future because consistency, trust, and clear authority now had to come before personal comfort. State representation means appearing and speaking on behalf of the crown during official ceremonies, diplomatic engagements, and national occasions. Returning those responsibilities too quickly would weaken the decision and suggest that royal authority could be ignored without lasting consequence. Camilla listened until he finished. The queen consort would remain beside her husband in private family life and attend limited personal occasions, but she would no longer direct the official program that had placed her at the center of public duty. She admitted that losing the schedule felt like losing the final proof that their long struggle had been accepted. Years of criticism had seemed worth enduring because the monarchy had eventually given her a visible place. Now that symbol was gone, Charles did not dismiss the pain. He acknowledged that the loss was real, but he refused to reverse the order. The monarch then admitted his own failure. His silence had allowed insecurity between Camilla and Anne to deepen until every small adjustment carried the weight of rivalry by refusing to set firm boundaries earlier. He had protected temporary peace while allowing trust to break beneath it. Anne received a handwritten message later that evening. The princess found only 2 sentences inside. Camilla asked her to protect the charitable causes attached to the transferred role and promised she would not interfere again. The message carried no demand for recognition and no attempt to recover control. It was the first sign that acceptance had replaced resistance and preserved those causes within the revised schedule. She refused to erase the work simply because authority had changed hands. The decision proved that taking responsibility did not require humiliating the woman who had held it before. Duty could remain firm without becoming cruel. The transfer became the clearest statement of the monarchy Charles intended to lead. Affection could shape private life, but official trust had to be earned, protected, and never borrowed without consent. And when Anne stepped forward while Camilla stepped back, the monarchy did not celebrate a winner. It survived because 3 wounded people finally accepted that duty without trust is only ceremony. But duty guided by accountability can still protect the crown.